You are far from your post, Inquisitor. What brings you here? We are in a sanctum holy to Utica. There are others like it in service to the other gods. I come here often to pray for her counsel, and in this space I may be assured that she hears me. That woman sought only to destroy the foundations of peace and civility that my people sacrificed everything to build. It has many uses, but its purpose is to bring structure to the chaos that surrounds it. They are monuments to Utica's greatest servants among my people. I hope to join them myself one day, but my work is not yet complete. The Inquisition was based on the need to cut the flesh from a rotting wound. What is a god? A higher power? A rewarder of good deeds and punisher of the wicked? Something men can turn to in their darkest moments when their days seem only like bridges from one tragedy to the next. Our gods are all these things. We are in a sacred place within earshot of the gods themselves. This is not the time. You've been through much these past few months. You will return home and you will rest. When you feel you have recovered, you may rejoin us at the trials. The Inquisition is far from over, and I will have need of you. There are many who continue to spread the lies of the apostate. The Inquisition will not end until we have pronounced judgment on all of them. How did you find it? Another in a string of acts of petty defiance. For all her knowledge, she always preferred spite over reason. Then she should have obeyed. I ask one thing of all my followers. She was incapable. A waste of rare talent and intellect. What of your cohorts, then? They have followed you to their deaths. Is it loyalty that brings them here? Or is it, as my agents suggest, that they have no direction of their own? You worshipped Aethys, did you not?
Your spies are good. What gave me away? The cape?
Yet when your god needed you the most, you chose your country.
We were being invaded. Not by anyone who was acting like a god.
Then I should think your hometown gave you a hero's welcome when you returned.
They made cake. Hard to blame people for losing faith when it's the gods who are misbehaving.
The gods argue over how best to prevent Kith society from destroying itself. These disruptions would not be necessary were mortal instinct not so diseased. You have devoted yourself to studying the work of my people. Why?
Because I believe we can learn from the past and use that knowledge to better ourselves. I wanted Rauatai to surpass the Anguithans, build upon what they knew.
And did you ever consider that these were things you were never meant to understand? That their comprehension is beyond you? You are living in the time of my people, Amawa. You owe them more than you will ever comprehend, and so it shall ever be. Greater civilizations than yours have attempted to reclaim what we buried. The greater their successes, the worse their fates in the end. I have seen to it. You built a weapon that delivered exactly as promised.
I served my goddess as you did yours.
Yet the other builders were slain, 11 of a dozen. Why not you? Were you somehow different? Redeemable in your god's sight?
Whatever desire I had to be redeemed in her eyes was weakness, purged by the Watcher's sight.
Or was it merely that your goddess wanted you dead as well, and your delusions of importance prevented you from seeing the obvious?
A whore's beguiling charms, nothing more. But the spell's broke now, Theos. The trial's over. I know friend from foe, and I've come here now to see a foe repaid.
You were able to destroy a god because another god wished it. Without her hand to guide you, you could not strike at a god any more than you could strike the sky. You are impotent, and not just from the pox. State your name and purpose, young acolyte.
My name belonged to the gods and my hand to their service. No more.
You serve none but yourself. Without contact with your order, you can have no higher purpose. Only the base concerns of the flesh. You have cast yourself from our ranks.
And I should have done it years before. I'd rather live in uncertainty than servitude.
And that uncertainty would lead you where it leads everyone. To doubt, to emptiness, to the many cruelties inspired by disbelief. You will have to forgive your Grandmaster for remaining skeptical of his initiate's choices. You are far from home, dwarf.
I knew my hunt would send me a long way from Masuk. It was a challenge I was glad to undertake for my village.
A journey, then? It must be of some import to take you so far and to last so long.
Anything worth doing comes at great cost.
So it was worth it, then, to tell a dying beast of things it neither understood nor had memory of. You are here because you are lost. The gods cannot reach everyone, I'm afraid. May you fare better in your next lives. I gather you have had your soul awakened. Why else would you shadow my footsteps like some stray mongrel? You think I have something to offer you, but our business was concluded long ago. I answered your questions once. That your soul is not fit to accept the answers is of little concern to me. I lied to no one. Not to you, not to anyone. The gods are real. They are everything we need them to be, and the world is better for it. The heart of this country has skipped a beat, nothing more. I have done far worse. I plunged the peaceful kingdom of Telosus into civil war. I slew the monarch of Desantio, whose people never knew hardship under his rule, and replaced him with a cruel despot who brought them to ruin. When plague arrived at the great city of Arborensis, I saw to it that the cure did not. They piled their dead outside the city in heaps that rose above their walls. That's where you are mistaken. There was a time, back when your soul was still a shapeless mist, when the world believed only in false gods. Thousands of them. Gods that told them to take slaves. Gods that told them to make war upon their neighbors and devour the slain. Gods that told them to burn their children alive and cover themselves in the ashes as a sign of their faith. But all that changed when they learned of the true gods. Our gods. All those misshapen, bestial instincts melted beneath the radiance of our god's majesty. You could see it in their eyes. That dull emptiness replaced with the glimmer of a kindled spark. And replaced it with one far worse. Have you imagined this existence? The one the apostate would have created. We are not all so virtuous as she. Without our gods, the most wicked, the most tyrannical, they would take that power for themselves. But more than that, it would be a hollow existence. All mysteries forever unanswered. All purposes constructed from meaninglessness. No endings to bring closure. Only a wheel, turning without mercy, grinding our spirits to dust. It is the least of all possible costs. Are you so dense as to think a faithless world would not be ridden with calamity? All I have seen, the millennia of experience. I will not be dissuaded from this course. This is the only way. You have not thought this through. There is no leaving this place for you. I allowed it once, but you have made it all too clear what a mistake my mercy was. With your soul and thousands of others, I will see this world purged of its suffering. Hear me, Boudica. Your servant calls for aid. Roak 10! With Pixie.
How may I help? How may I help? I?
Yes?
Huh?
Got him. What? I have
Following your lead. still!
How may I help?
What?
Following your lead.
I'm here.
Stand still! Yes?
Huh?
Worth it.
Arthur von Rock.
All those lifetimes spent to preserve a single vital secret. I can't imagine having that much certainty.
That's the servant down, and the mistress still to go. A good start, worthy of being built upon.
After journeying for lifetimes, I can't imagine his failure, knowing it was all for nothing.
Some point, you have to look at the things your god is telling you to do. And ask yourself if it's worth it.
He spent his lives, more than any of us will ever know. For what? Binding the world to a lie. Could a man like that ever be redeemed?
No! You cannot allow this. He will have no reminders. He will not remember the message we wrote on his fragmented bones and carved into his flesh. The lesson we burned into his soul.
You are kinder to that man than I would have been. Of course.
You know something of quiet servitude, Watcher. Groveling and simpering before the gods whose aid you need, so that when they finally raise you to a place of power, you can seize what you desire. You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hadrat House, those pompous, dear wooden zealots, the wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor, and receiving riddles and visions in response. And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you? The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron. Finish the work Theos began. Strengthen Woodica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favored. You say that now, but when you're standing in front of the machine, considering the lifetimes and the powers that await you, we'll see what you do.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale, pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Dyrwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Theos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time, parents of hollow-born children woke to the cries of their infants, and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren, or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of Hollowborn had died during Widewind's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last Hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. Though you had killed Lord Radric in his throne room, so strong was his drive to rid his land of Eothasians that he returned to life as a Death Guard, a deathless crusader for his brutal cause. With the remains of his humanity stripped away, Radric came to see all the people of Gilded Vale as worshippers of Aethys, and one day he led his forces into the village personally to see them all purged from his lands. Gilded Vale was left a hollow shell, its buildings ruined, and its people slaughtered. Even travelers and would-be squatters knew better than to take refuge inside its borders. Lord Radric returned to Radric's Hold, where he remained, keeping eternal watch over his barren domain. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wulfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, The streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But once the dozens had regrouped in the wake of the riots, they quickly put an end to the criminal activity. They patrolled the streets in droves and administered their brand of law on any perceived offenders. This was not the erratic justice of the mob, however. The dozens had taken to heart the strengths of their adversaries, the Knights of the Crucible, and emerged as a far more organized, disciplined force. With the waning strength of the other Defiance Bay powers, the leadership of the dozens took the opportunity to establish its own group as the dominant peacekeeping force in the city. The dozens would soon find themselves overwhelmed by the problems of a leaderless metropolis. But they found an uneasy new partner in the surviving forces of the Crucible Knights, who understood the city's infrastructure and were able to keep the worst of its problems under control. The destruction of the machine atop Ter Noaneth spelled the end of the reanimated corpses in Heritage Hill. Though at first few were willing to venture into the abandoned district, it was soon cleaned out and rebuilt. The district's horrors still fresh in people's minds. It would be some time before it was fully repopulated, but eventually the lure of cheap prime land would all but erase the memory. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an Animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few Animancers survived the first day. Many Deerwoodans took the end of Widewind's legacy as a sign, both that the gods did not approve of Animancy, and that the purging of Animancers in Defiance Bay had been enough to satisfy them. In time, their rage would subside, and a number of surviving Animancers remained in and around Defiance Bay, often taking to the wilds to practice their science without repercussions. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every Thane and Earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodanians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. After the death of the Master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Ardnua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Ardnua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Pallegina had gone against the Duke Spell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfath to accommodate the recovering Deerwoodan market. With the Deerwood's people still weakened by Widewind's legacy, the Vailian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Pallegina was banished from the republics. She traveled north in the Eastern Reach, avoiding Vailian ports and entering the ranks of the kind wayfarers. Despite her bravery and dedication to those in her care, her strange appearance made her feel like an outsider wherever she went. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Theos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Theos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. With the Watcher's goals accomplished, and his own vows fulfilled, Kanarua sailed back to Tekoa. His friends and family found him much changed, for a pall had fallen upon the man, smothering his former enthusiasm. Called before the Lore College, Kana told them of the pain the Engwithan legacy brought to the lands abroad. He insisted that a search for answers abroad could only fragment the Rawatai people, as it had done to the Deerwood. His findings were met with much respect, and Kanarua's voice came to be considered an influential one in the growing move towards Rawatai's isolation. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun and Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood, and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance used Magrin's strength only until Theos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. Sagani experienced the 4 months of her journey back to Masuk in vivid colors. She strove to memorize every moment of her final trip through the Deerwood, Erglonfoth, the Valian Republics, and beyond, preparing to tell her village of what she had seen on her long journey. All of Masuk shared in her triumph, and she felt her pride and elation magnified by the joy of her village. Never again did she doubt the value of her sacrifices. After decades as a long hunter, Sagani finally became one of Masuk's most respected elders. She guided her community with wise counsel, and a generation after she finally passed, another huntress journeyed into the world to find her soul. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.